Now, we need to sew the cake piece. Take the yarn tail of the cake, thread it through the yarn needle. This is the edge of round 1 of cake. And this is the edge of round 17. Align the edge of round 1 and round 17. Insert the needle in the stitch on round 1 of cake and pull yarn through. And insert needle into the stitches on round 1 and 17 of cake and draw yarn through. Continue with 1 stitch on round 1 and 17 of cake to sew the cake. Repeat along the stitches on round 1 and 17 of cake. Now, insert the needle into next stitch on round 1 and 17 of cake and draw yarn through. Now, we are going to sew the cake to the cup. Turn over the cake, with the yarn tail facing up. We need to use this yarn tail to close the opening of the cake. Turn the cake piece inside out, so it will be easier to sew the cake and cup together. Align the slip stitches line of cup and cake and place the cake inside the cup. Take out a 40 cm length of apricot yarn. Thread the yarn tail through the yarn needle and tie a knot at the yarn tail in the other side. Insert the needle into the first stitch of the 11th round of the cup and the stitch of the cake, draw yarn through to the inside. Don't pull tight the knot. And insert needle into the next stitch of the cake and the stitch of the cup, draw yarn through. Now, we can see a line inside the cupcake. Repeat 1 stitch into the next stitch of the cup and the stitch of cake, draw yarn through. Continue with 1 stitch on the cake and cup to connect the two parts. Repeat around the cup and cake to sew them together. Now, insert the needle into the next stitch of the cake and the stitch of the cup, draw yarn through. Tie a knot under the original knot on the first stitch where we insert the needle and pull it tight. And insert the needle inside and pull yarn through inside of the cup. Poke the knot inside the cup to hide it. Repeat to hide another yarn tail. Put the yarn tails inside the cup. And restore the folded piece to its original shape. Now, we can stuff the cake with stuffing. When stuffing cotton, add small amounts multiple times to shape the cake properly. Now, we are going to close the opening of the cake. Thread the yarn tail of cake through the yarn needle. Insert the needle into the first stitch on left and pull yarn through. And insert needle into next stitch from inside to outside and draw yarn through. Continue with one stitch from outside to inside of the cake. Repeat one stitch from inside to outside at cake. We also can insert needle into the next stitch and bring it out one stitch to the left. Continue with one stitch on the cake and bring it out one stitch to the left. Repeat around the cake. If you feel that the cake is not full enough, continue stuffing the cake with cotton. Pull the yarn tail to close the opening. Insert needle into the next stitch and then needle back into the ring left between the stitches. Pull tight to make a knot. Repeat with 1 stitch on cake. And 1 stitch on cake again. And insert the needle inside and pull yarn through somewhere on the other side of the cake. Cut the excess yarn tail. Poke the yarn tail inside the cake to hide it. Now, we are going to sew the cherry on cake. Thread the yarn tail of cherry through the yarn needle. Insert the needle in the center stitch on the top of the cake and pull yarn through. Repeat 1 stitch on round 7 of the cherry and draw yarn through. Continue with 1 stitch on the cake and 1 stitch on the cherry to connect the two parts. Repeat around the cherry. Now, insert the needle into next stitch on the cake and draw yarn through. Insert the needle into the edge stitch of cherry again, draw yarn through. Don't pull tight. Insert needle back into the ring left between the stitches, and pull tight to make a knot. And insert the needle inside and pull yarn through somewhere on the other side of the cake. Poke the yarn tail inside the cake to hide it. Now, we have finished the cupcake with purple yarn. We need to crochet other cupcakes in the same way with the correct colors as per your pattern.